I would like to invite Mina, our founder and director, to talk more about our findings from our latest briefing.
Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you all the friends and colleagues who joined us today. And so, as you know, like in the last few weeks, we published a new briefing following the very first one from last year in September. And so really the point of the briefing is try to really emphasize the need and kind of direct us for more actions to how to respond to what's happening in the scamming compound. So I'm just going to share my screen now, and this is the briefing that we produce, and we have also translated into 2 other languages, so you are able to find it both in Chinese and in Bengali. Very much is speaking about like how to respond to the victims in forced scam labor. So that's the reason why, for example, today we also have lots of law enforcement professionals and government officials who are joining us today, because the idea is really trying to see how can we respond to what's happening in front of us. So the briefing is available in both Chinese and also Bengali. I'm going to walk you through the first few pages, and then Valentina will also continue for the rest of the pages. So again, like to emphasize, last year, HRC, we started responding to the scamming compound because seeing some victims and survivors coming to us. At the time, we did a bit more kind of direct rescue and then really kind of trying to support victims. Now we are more shifting towards a new priority, which is to support governments and private sector leaders to counter the criminal activities in scamming compounds. At the same time, also to persuade larger anti-trafficking organizations to prioritize their resources in countering what's happening. So the key messages from this briefing is 3. The first one is to emphasize the profile of victim, because when we started last year, a lot of the time what we see victims are mainly from Southeast Asia, but when the time continues, we realize that's not the full picture, and there are indeed, for example, victims all the way from Africa and from other parts of the world. So it's to emphasize the victim profile. The second goal of this briefing is to emphasize embassy's role in how to contribute to successful rescues, because again, this is one thing that's really problematic and really kind of needs more efforts. The third part is about forced criminalities, because we realize a lot of the time government officials and rules in each country just doesn't recognize these people who are being forced to scam as victims of human trafficking. So again, coming to the victim profile, we are talking about a really wide profile. We do see there's a bit of difference between, for example, Chinese victims compared to the rest of the victims from different nationalities. But when we speak like by and large, like victims are from all over the world, we see individuals from mixed profile, someone who's from very like financially struggled profile, or even their family is actually affluent. We see a wide range of ages, from 14 years old all the way to 40. We see also some citizens who are like, they just young and they don't have any criminal records, they're just good citizens. But there are also some, for example, in Taiwan, we see many victims, they are actually someone who carry some minor criminal records. So for example, fraud or other kind of money laundering things, usually because their bank book has been used by criminals. So I kind of symbolize they are from a bit more like marginalized society, marginalized background. We also see people from more dysfunctional families or families who support them well, physically fit or disability, all genders, that's what we see. And then of course, the common trait is that they are all quite educated and tech savvy. Sorry for showing the images, but something that we found quite important is really to show people the degree, the violence in the scamming compound. When we are talking about victims, it's really beyond just the people who are being forced to scam, but also there are models that use video chat with the prospective victims. There will be people who are being forced to conduct sex work. There are guards. We heard there are like 4 types of different guards that will be in the gate, in different floors, and they all carry different kind of responsibilities, and many of them can also be forced. There are agents who are sourcing daily products, who are supporting the compound owners to buy and sell their products. it's a global issue, as the map can show. Like it's from everywhere. We have personally met some American victims as well. Also, of course, all the way from like Middle East, from like Central Asia, from East Africa, a wider profile. And as we try to convey this message that whenever there are victims, basically that indicates they are traffickers, because it's almost impossible for the criminals in Cambodia and Myanmar to try to get their victims, the quote unquote dogs or like scammers, all the way from East Africa without any support. So usually that means that they are local traffickers who's actively sourcing, who's actively sending the victims to Southeast Asia. So that's another message we're trying to convey, that even though it's extremely difficult for law enforcement authorities around the world to try to end the situation in the compounds in Cambodia or Myanmar, however, they can always try to do something with their local traffickers at home. So a bit more about victim rescues. So the role of embassies, of course, there are lots of different ways potentially to bring the victims. And then, like, for example, in the beginning, we see sometimes criminals are asking the family members, hey, if you want your children to go back, just pay the ransom, which in a way it's really problematic, because if the ransom is paid, then in a way it's kind of encouraging the criminal that this is a good method to try to trick the money from the family member. However, of course, when the family members are extremely worried, that's maybe something that they will try to arrange privately, but definitely it's not a method that's sustainable. So the more sustainable way, it's of course if the law enforcement body in country in Cambodia and Myanmar can do their job, but we also realize that's almost impossible. Then the third way, now we are proposing here, it's the role of embassies. Basically what we realize is when embassies are showing the authority, or not necessarily embassy, but anyone who's from the kind of citizens government. So for example, if it's Taiwanese governments, Bangladeshi governments, anyone always showing the authorities going to negotiate with the Cambodian authorities and saying, hey, please give me my citizens back, I need them back, then there's a higher successful rate for that to happen. And so that's particularly challenging when the embassies are not responding to their citizens. So for example, we see Chinese embassies tend to just look at those people, Chinese citizens, as like lawbreakers who smuggle themselves from China through Vietnam to Cambodia, and that results in an attitude of negligence to their own citizens becomes very difficult. And a bit more also, like, as we mentioned, the persecution in source country traffickers. Later we have Richa, who will talk a little bit more about how Taiwanese governments and police that persecuted criminals. And now I'm going to shift to Valentina. Valentina, would you like to continue with the forced criminality?
Yes, thank you, Mina. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'll just continue. So another issue that we're seeing, so as Mina mentioned, when victims come out of the compounds, they face detention in detention centres, and another issue they're facing is being viewed as criminals rather than as victims of human trafficking. So because of the activities that they're forced to conduct whilst in these scamming compounds, upon exiting the compounds, the authorities are viewing them as criminals for the scamming and other illicit activities that maybe they were forced to do whilst in the compounds. And if they're not being viewed as criminals, if they're not being viewed as victims, then they're not being charged as such under the non-punishment principle. So the non-punishment principle states that any individual should not be charged for any illicit activities that they were forced to carry out as a direct result of their trafficking situation. And as the briefing outlines, the non-punishment principle is very clearly stated in several acts and conventions across the globe, such as the UK Modern Slavery Act, the ASEAN Convention Against Trafficking in Persons, especially women and children, and also the Prevention and Suppression of Human Trafficking Act in Bangladesh. And even though, and also the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, the principles on guidelines in human rights and human trafficking also outlines the non-punishment principle. So despite the fact that it is clearly stated across these wide variety of conventions and acts, it is not being carried out in reality in the authorities that are acting in where the compounds exist, such as Cambodia and Myanmar. So this results in victims from the compounds being treated as criminals, and they're charged and often left in detention centres or being prosecuted. So we need to be seeing a greater understanding from the authorities of the non-punishment principle. However, even if they do have an understanding of the non-punishment principle, a major issue is the lack of identification of human trafficking victims. So without a clear understanding of what's going on in these scamming compounds, the authorities are unable to view these people as victims. They're viewing them as criminals, because the online scamming is different to what we usually see in forced labor. So forced labor is often, as we outline here, dirty, dangerous, and demeaning. So because the forced labor that's happening in the compounds is different, so it's taking place in an office setting, they're given multiple devices, they're working on computers, sat at desks. It doesn't fall under the usual expectations of forced labor and slavery that we see usually represented in the modern day slavery aspect. However, it's crucial that authorities begin to understand the changing dynamics of modern slavery and forced labor today. So we also outline a case study in the briefing, which is a case study of a victim from Vietnam, who is called Mr. K for the case. And he was trafficked from Vietnam into the UK in 2016, and he was forced into the production of cannabis. And following advice from his lawyers, he pleaded guilty to the production of cannabis and was sentenced under this crime. However, the case was then brought back to the court by the Criminal Case Review Commission, and in 2022, he was acquitted of his charges because following new evidence and proper review of the evidence, it was clear that he was a victim of forced criminality, and following the advice of the non-punishment principle, all his charges were dropped and he was viewed as a child victim of modern slavery. So with this, we created some recommendations. So for the national governments, as I said, and as Mina said, it's crucial that embassies are mandated with diplomatic activities and also citizen emergency support. So they need to have the capacity to deal with their citizens that are trapped in these compounds and offer them support whilst they're in the compounds for safe exit. But also once they exit the compounds, they need support, whether that be mental health, language support, lawyers, and also help in returning home. And then once they return home, they need support in their reintegration journey. So the non-punishment principle also needs to be understood by law enforcement. So this could be done through training, capacity building, and understanding the ever-changing faces of human trafficking today. And also survivors need to be treated as informants and experts on this crime. They are the people that have lived through this experience. They have witnessed it firsthand. And a lot of the information we have gathered throughout our time on this crime is from survivors and local NGOs that are acting on the ground or have lived experience of this crime. So for anti-trafficking organizations, they can work with governments that do not recognize their citizens as victims of human trafficking and slavery. They can work with them to let them know that these people are actually victims of trafficking and not just criminals, and also work with law enforcement and relevant authority bodies to make them understand the non-punishment principle and have better identification of victims. And also collaborate with governments to provide support services. So a lot of NGOs are providing mental health and physical support, financial support. So this can be integrated into government principles and guidelines to offer support to victims coming from the compounds. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Valentina. And Kavya, back to you.
Thank you, Mina and Valentina, who's our project officer, for such a thorough presentation on the briefing. I would now like to invite Salam, our survivor empowerment officer, to shed some light on the victims' perspectives and the notion of forced criminality.
Hello everyone, good morning and good afternoon. I'm very pleased to part of this STEM panel. Yeah, actually today I will elaborate a bit more about forced criminality, one of the key areas of our concern highlighted in the HRC briefing. Actually, I want to introduce myself first. I am a survivor. We are talking about online scam, forced criminality in scamming compound, and I am one of them who already faced that situation. I was detained in Cambodia for 5 months, and it was very terrible situation. And yeah, also we discussed about the difficulties of identifying victims, like my colleagues Valentina and Mina already mentioned. Online scamming actually happen in modern office, so it seems like a very cool situation there. But actually, it's not like that. People was forced to work there as scammer. Not only scammer, scamming is the main thing of scamming compounds to force people scam others. But there are other so many works people was forced to work there, like as a security guard. There are so many type security guard. Actually, minimum 2 to 3 type security guard have been every single scamming compound I saw, because I was stayed in 3 different scamming compound, and always have a special security guard in every single scamming compound. And of that special security force, all of the people are from ex-army person. I met some special security guard in a compound, like all of them were from ex-Nepal army. So we have this like a common language. Yeah, so I can talk with them very frankly, and I know from them actually why they are ex-army person. They already have a good career, and now they can do a business in their home country, and they can spend their life very easily. But they say actually, yeah, we want to try that, but we got a great job offer here, like as a security officer, and we came here and we detained. Our passport also like kept by our kept from us, and from them we also not allowed to go outside the scamming compound, and we also forced here to work as a security guard. So not only like normal people like me and other are forced to work in scamming compound, also some army officers who are very highly professional, they also forced to work in scamming compound. So this situation actually elevated the real situation of scamming compound, how dangerous is this. And also have some other forms like working, like normally normal people, how many hours they work in a day, like 8 hours to 12 hours, but in the scamming compound it's totally different. It started from the 12 hours, and it's like maximum 20 hours. I used to work 18 hours daily in scamming compound, and leave, it's like there is no leave in scamming compound. We work usually 5 days or 6 days in a week, but I was worked in scamming compound for 5 months, and I never got any single day leave. So it's very difficult to work there. And not only work without leave, there are so many female victims who are forced to talk with targets or victims, you can say, uh, over video call as a model, and they also forced to work as a prostitute inside the scamming compound. So the situation is very terrible, and the bad luck of victims who detained in scamming compound, when they ask help from law enforcement body and embassies. I know some situation because I helped some Bangladeshi people to rescue from scamming compounds, and also from Cambodia detention center. So I feel that difficulties, like people are not willing to accept them as a victims, especially law enforcement department and embassy person, because I already mentioned scamming compound, it looks like very luxurious workplace office. So people say, no, it's maybe not forced criminality. So maybe they are willing to work there. Yeah, I admit some people are some people are willing to scam people, but it's in very small amount, small number. Most of the people, more than 90% or 95% people are forced to work there as a scammer. So when they're asking help from law enforcement body and embassies, so they actually not pay good attention to them. But actually they are very vulnerable there. So this is you can say we already mentioned in our briefing, it's a lack of the knowledge about modern slavery, because day by day we are facing the new forms of modern slavery, and online scamming compound, it's very new concept. So law enforcement body and government should be adopted with new form of modern slaveries. And actually, yeah, I don't want to long my speech. I want to close my speech with one thing, like, if we can't stop these challenges, or if we can't overcome from these challenges, then it may be better to think in other ways to stop these challenges, like who are running this scamming compound. We should try to dismantle these criminals. If we able to do that, then this problem will be automatically solved. Thank you. I'm going back to Kavya.
Thank you, Salam, for sharing your valuable insights. I would now request Richard Jan, Senior Investigator at the Criminal Investigation Bureau in Taiwan, to present his views on the police's efforts in rescuing and clamping down on criminal operations in the region.
Yes, thank you, everybody. And now I'm sharing my experience in Cambodia here. And at first, I introduce myself. My name is Richard Jan, and I'm a senior investigator, and I work in the division of International Criminal Affairs in the Criminal Investigation Bureau in Taiwan. And I was assigned to Cambodia for the liaison police officer for 2 months for rescuing the victim of human trafficking. So I'm sharing my experience here. Next. Yes, we can. Sorry, because I want to speak more, and I write down all I want to say on the paper. So please allow me to read the paper. From April to December 2022, we received approximately 600 or more reported cases. The reporter informed the police that their family members, friends, or even themselves were being recruited to work in Cambodia for jobs such as casino attendants, customer service personnel, loan assistance, and even participating in the production of adult content. However, upon arriving in Cambodia, they realized they had been deceived. The victims were all sought into a scamming compound where they were forced to engage in scam activities. Their passports were confiscated, and they were prohibited from leaving the compound. If they resisted or performed poorly, they would be subjected to severe beating, just like the photos you see on the slide, or electric shock. Next. Therefore, the Taiwanese government has established the Anti-Human Trafficking Operations Center to deal with these issues, which integrated the police and the immigration, judicial, and the diplomatic system to conduct rescue operations abroad and crack down on criminal syndicates that deceive and recruit victims within Taiwan. And on the following slide, I will focus on 2 aspects in my speeches. The first The first one is external rescue operation, and the second one is internal effort to crack down the criminal structures. Now let's talk about the first one. The first one is the external rescue operations. There are two important things we have to do. The first one, coordinating with Cambodian authorities for rescuing operations. In order to conduct a rescue operation within Cambodia, the involvement of the Cambodian authorities is essential. In 2022, the United States downgraded Cambodia's human trafficking tier to tier 3. The Cambodian government is actively seeking to improve the situation of human trafficking within their country. As a result, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Interior Sakin announced the establishment of a hotline dedicated to combating human trafficking. They are actively assisting in handling various reported cases. We have been in contact with the team led by Sakin and have compiled the following information just like on the slide for each report cases. Just like the slide, you can see this one, yeah. You can see the photo, the victim, he has a swollen face, he was beaten too. Okay, the next one. And the second one, we have to coordinating the repatriation of the victims. As the victims may or may not have their passport with them, when leaving the compound, we need to assist the production of repatriation documents. Many victims may also face financial difficulties and be unable to afford airfare or pay fines for overstaying their visas. In such cases, we reach out to their families or charitable organizations to address the victims' financial issues. If they are unable to afford the expenses, the Taiwanese government provides $1,000 per person to cover the victims' repatriation costs, including airfare and living expenses. Okay, the next slide. Let's talk about the internal effort to combat human trafficking in Taiwan. And we have learned from the victims' testimonies about the tactics used by the human traffickers in Taiwan. They also post fake job listings on social media platforms, such as recruiting typists, casino attendants, or customer service personnel, and provide an anonymous contact method, such as line ID or communication with potential victims. The recruiter would use fabricated information to deceive victims, claiming that the advertised job offers high salaries and excellent working conditions. They may even send fake photos of the working environment to make it appear legitimate, and recruiter offer assistance in obtaining passport, arrange the purchase of plane tickets, and they want to assure victims that they will be personally escorted to the airport for check-in. Upon arriving in Cambodia, the victims were met by individuals who reveal their true intentions and sell them into the scamming compound. And the second one, we hold a press conference to raise awareness among the public. After uncovering the case, we held press conferences to inform the public and urge them not to believe those false advertisements, thereby preventing further incidents of Taiwanese citizens traveling to Cambodia. We even conducted awareness campaign in front of the in front of the airline counters, specifically serving flights to Cambodia at airport. And we are aiming to prevent potential victims from boarding flight to Cambodia, just like the photos on the slide. By utilizing media campaigns and actively intercepting potential victims from being sought to Cambodia, these actions have yielded tangible results. The number of people traveling to Cambodia has significantly decreased, and there has been a notable reduction in the number of victims affected by this crime. Yes, that is all my slide. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Richard, for your insightful presentation.
Yes,
May I now invite Ling Li, who's a regional consultant at the University of Liverpool, to share with us her experiences as a frontline responder in the victims' rescue efforts.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining this webinar. My name is Ling Li, and I have been working closely with Chinese victims of forced scam labor in Cambodia and Myanmar since May last year. So in my short presentation, I will draw from my forthcoming book on the scamming compound to outline some of the key issues that undermine civil society's engagement with Chinese survivors, who, according to all the available evidence, constitute the vast majority of the people trapped in the scam operations throughout Southeast Asia. I will begin by telling the story of a couple survivor I helped, one of whom was a 16-year-old mother who was already pregnant when she and her partner got trafficked by boat from China to Cambodia. And I got in contact with them after they escaped from the compound, and they were detained by the Cambodian immigration police because they didn't have proper documents. And the mother and the newborn baby were suffering from malnutrition. All of them were all covered with bed bugs, and no treatment were provided to them. They could not speak English or Khmer, and then the Chinese embassy never came for a visit or consultation. And the mother was also in a state of severe depression and cannot take care of the baby. And this is a common experience among survivors in Cambodia, who end up being preyed upon by the local immigration police. However, what I want to highlight here is what comes next for them. So after they were bailed out of the immigration detention by one of the rescue team members, and she could not find any support for herself or her child. I tried to raise some funding for them among friends in China, but I was warned that according to the country's charity law, individual fundraising was illegal. So I support them out of my own pocket for their shelter and food for like 2 to 3 months. And at the same time, I was trying very hard to refer their cases to different anti-human trafficking organizations in Cambodia for their healthcare and repatriation. A local NGO agreed to provide medical care and food for the family on humanitarian basis. Okay, but shelter remains a problem because the existing shelter dedicated to modern slavery victims in Cambodia were mostly for female and not equipped with Chinese speaking staff. And in addition, since they cannot be identified as human trafficking victims, so no NGOs nor United Nations agencies could help them to repatriate back to their country. And what was shocking the most was that when I tried to contact one of the rescue team to seek the help, they suggested that the woman's boyfriend find work in Cambodia to pay for their flight. And when I asked them how the victim could find a job without having proper paper and avoid the risk of being exploited or even trafficked, I was told by them that they can find the victim a job, and then so they can earn their way home. They hold the idea that victims should not depend on any organization to send them home just because they are trafficked. And of course, I personally, I cannot accept it. And after the family eventually managed to go back to China, their lot did not improve. The girl had initially been trafficked because she had tried to run away from her violent father. At that time, she had trusted her boyfriend when he suggested that they try to start a new life in Cambodia. And after all that happened in Cambodia, she left her partner, but without proper intervention from social workers and no financial support for her baby. She had no choice but return to her dad for help. I followed her case and helped her to find a psychologist and in China. But however, after 3 sessions, she dropped out and sent me this final message. She wrote, "I want to thank you for everything you've done to me, but I don't know what I can expect in the future. My dad took the baby away, blaming me for being not able to be a mother. I'm scared he will beat me again if I fight back. So I think I will just go to another city or country to find a job. Hope this time I won't be tricked again." So this is a very sad message. I like to use her case because she is so-called perfect victim. In normal situations, she can get support easy, all right? But what happened? Why that is not functioning here? So her case demonstrates many limitations of civil society engagement with survivors. And the first thing is lack of relevant expertise on modern slavery in the organization that responding to this phenomenon. So there were new local groups that sprung up in response to forced scam labor, but they kind of lack of proper training on how to operate in the field of modern slavery. And many existing groups joined the battle recently, but are at a loss on how to deal with this new phenomenon. So this makes it difficult for them to engage with survivors who have gone through extremely traumatic experience, and occasionally leads them to make basic mistakes that can endanger victims. And the second thing is lack of coordination among the actors. So there has been collaborations among different actors, but it is most often an ad hoc basis, and there's no attempt to establish a system to coordinate and use the resources that are valuable now, more like in a more efficient way. For instance, in the case of the girl, I didn't know where to go ask for help. And now even now, if I get a non-Chinese victim, I don't know who I can refer this case to. And the third one is the challenge in identifying the victim. Well, Mina, Valentina, and Salam already mentioned about this difficulty. I just want to add something about China. There's another layer on it. So unlike in Taiwan, that both genders were trafficked, we receive 90 to 95% male cases. The reason behind it is it still need to be analyzed, but one thing is sure that according to the Chinese law, the subjects of human trafficking can only be female and children. This legal loophole made it impossible for male victims to be identified after they return to China. So if all the organizations are waiting for their victim, the victim status to be confirmed by the government to provide support, it means Chinese nationals will be naturally excluded. And there are 4 more limitations related to rescue and survival engagement in mainland China. The first thing is the language barrier, as mentioned already. Both local and international organizations face a language barrier that prevent them from engaging with Chinese victims. And to overcome this, many of them resort to Chinese-speaking volunteers. I mean, this is a solution that works perfectly for a short term, if the volunteers are valuable, but it is clear unsustainable on a longer term. And the second thing is about lack of China expertise and the connections. And the absence of expertise make the corruption between Chinese and international actors even harder. So while the Chinese authority with their policies that discourage domestic civil societies to link up with foreign counterparts are largely to blame for it, similar attempts from the other side have also been very limited. Also, it has been well documented in the existing literature on how Chinese citizens tend to trust stakeholders state actors, such as the police and the embassies, far more than non-state actors, such as NGOs. So there is a widespread belief in China that there's no such a thing as a free meal, and foreign NGOs are suspicious. So this lack of trust, compounded by a more general loss of trust, deriving from their personal experience, make any attempt to provide assistance much more challenging. And the third thing is aftercare. Well, Mina already talked about this, so I will not repeat. I understand I think it's the most severe limitation of current civil society in China and beyond. So what I suggest in order to address these issues, the first is that I think there has to be a training or several trainings on modern slavery and survivor engagement for people involved in providing assistance to victims of the scamming compound. And also more resources have to be assigned to hire Chinese-speaking staff in local organizations working in this field and produce Chinese language information materials targeting survivors. And then the second thing is to create links with organizations in mainland China to provide aftercare service for the victims. And for the government level, we need to keep showing that we care. For example, 8 months ago, the selling price for a Taiwanese to Myanmar was $40,000 US. Now it is only $6,000 US. This is because scam company found out that the Taiwan authority has pushed the rescue. So if they buy someone, the person will be rescued soon, and it is not good for business. So it's just simple mathematics and business ideal. So I really would thank you for all the law enforcement to participate in this webinar. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Richard and Ling and Salam, for really, really powerful speech. I'm just going to add a bit. I mean, I feel it's really powerful because Ling and Richard, we have been working since last year for a long time, and it has been really, really difficult. I mean, for us to be able to speak openly now, it's because the environment is a bit safer. Otherwise, there was a time that people try to keep it a little bit, you know, secretive and try not to be identified. And Ling and Richard, both of them have done tremendous work on the ground. And Richard, for example, didn't mention several, like, you know, dramas or dangers that he personally faced in Cambodia, especially when sometimes, you know, like journalists come and sometimes threatening to opportunities, and also the determination he follow our criminals. And like he described to me before, like how he followed the criminals and then go to the hotels and trying to realize like different kind of abnormal kind of victims coming in and out of hotel, the second day being sent to the airport, and he kind of follow up on that, the determination that he showed. And Ling has personally also really on the ground and from day one, and, you know, sharing information and all the frustrations, and especially we are facing something that very, very little organizations are out there that doing the job frontline, but then we are facing a massive amount of victims and survivors who need support. So I think it's really quite a tremendous, you know, opportunity for us today, that sharing all these with all the stakeholders, and so we can, you know, brainstorm together and then think about the ways forward. Definitely right now it's very different from a few months ago. There's a little bit more awareness, a little bit more like journalism reports. And also we are seeing, you know, like situation is shifting on a kind of a day-to-day basis between Myanmar and Cambodia. So yeah, like now we're going to open the floor and welcome more questions. And this is a space that definitely we all try to strategizing and see what we can do better. So please feel free to either send a question in the chat box, or if you're willing, unmute yourself and raise questions. I can see there's already a first one. Question for Richard. I understand that your focus is primarily dedicated to victims, but I would like to ask if you could share any insights into the money flow out of these compounds, more specifically to your understanding and perhaps from what you've heard from victims. What are some of the ways that proceeds of these scams are being laundered. Yeah, Richard, would you like to share more on money side? And 左下角那边有一个，OK，
Can you hear me? Okay. About the let me check. About the money flows. Yes, as I know, the victim talked to me about the money flow because the syndicate in Taiwan, they recruit the victim in Taiwan, and then they saw them to the Cambodia, and they received the money in the virtual currency. Yeah, especially the USDT. Everyone knows USDT, and their partner in Cambodia, they received the USDT from the compound, and their partner rewired the virtual currency to Taiwan immediately. Yeah, so the most important money flow is the virtual currency, just I know.
Great, thank you, Richard. Yeah, Monica, would you like? Sorry, the next question is from Monica. So is there a collaboration between NGOs and authorities, and is there a meaningful cross-border cooperation between authorities? Richard, would you like to answer this as well?曾警官，这一题你可以回答吗？So maybe I would answer first, and maybe if there are other speakers who are happy to respond, also welcome. From what we know, there's no really kind of official collaboration at the moment. There's a lot of chat groups, WhatsApp groups, online group, and that's the reason why, for example, HRC, we have been working with Richard and Taiwanese police for a long time, but it's nothing official. It's more just kind of intelligence sharing. And for example, when it comes to victim and survivor support, we do kind of collaborate together between NGOs, and that's also a similar situation. As far as we are aware of, there's no real meaningful cross-border cooperation between authorities at the moment, but definitely something that would be really helpful, especially also even for victims who are in the compound at the moment. Sometimes they reach out and saying, hey, we already seeing one like suspicion transaction is going to happen. One of our victims from the Western world, they are about to transfer $1 million into our account. We want to stop them, but then there's no way for us to actually get trustworthy authorities who will actually listen and able to collaborate on that. So definitely it's a very needed job to see more collaboration between authorities and between NGOs and authorities. Richard, would you like to add anything on that?
I'm just watching the question, sorry.
Okay.
Um,
就是有没有政府之间的合作，还有 NGO 跟政府之间的合作。
Yes, in my cases, because there is no diplomatic relationship between Taiwan and Cambodia, so we have to say the official cooperation. We have no official cooperation between the two countries, but we use the channel, Mr. Sokin, that provide us a hotline, and we provide some document about the victims to Mr. Sokin, and he dispatched their police to help us to rescue the victims. I think it's kinds of cooperation. Yes, and we have some cooperation with the NGO, just like HRC and GASO. Everyone knows GASO, like maybe Global Anti-Scamming Organization, and we have some cooperation with them. Yes.
Thank you, Richard. Ling, do you want to add something?
Yes, I can add from the Chinese side. So just I think a few weeks ago, the authorities between Thailand, Myanmar, and China had a meeting. So right now, China is doing a crackdown in the north of Myanmar. Well, but then the way of doing it is not really through the authority like cooperation. So they suggest the family to call the embassy, Myanmar embassy in China or Chinese embassy in Myanmar, and then they can forward these cases to the government, and then the government will send a notification to the compound and ask them to release the people. But in the practical side, no, it's not functioning really well because the family members of victim normally they are from the rural place. So first they have to open an international call to call the Chinese embassy, and then also the language, they speak dialect and then they cannot speak Mandarin, and so that's a main issue now. And then when they ask the local police to help them to do this, the local police doesn't understand what is like scamming happening, so they won't do that for them. So in the implementing part is quite problematic, and the NGO and authorities, as I already said, that is quite an issue like in China between the cooperation between NGOs and authorities. But then we have kind of groups that the individual police officers are cooperating with us. They have good faith, they want to help people, but then they cannot present as a government. So that's the reality here. Yeah.
Thank you, Ling. By the way, I want to add a bit on John's first question. I know John, I think he's already left, but in terms of the money flow, and on the money laundering side, we do see that as Richard also briefly mentioned, it's using cryptocurrencies, but also sometimes we see like in one compound, a specific company, it's handling that kind of money laundering services. So for example, let's say in KK compound, there's like multiple companies, usually like, each company may be specializing, okay, using LinkedIn, using like Twitter, using different methods to scam their victims. And there's one or two specific companies that we have identified that they are particularly providing that kind of money laundering service for the rest. And so like if you follow the money, you definitely can see, for example, that it's being put it into some like a doji website, so like using cryptos, and then back to, for example, Binance, and then from Binance, like a multiple accounts, like kind of money mills, like laundering that kind, the cryptocurrencies, and then transfer back to either, for example, Thai baht or like Cambodian currencies or like US dollars. And usually the transactions in the compounds, around the compound, it's still using cash. Okay, the next question. What are the gaps in responding to forced scam labor, and to the survivors in Cambodia? Salam, Valentina, would you like to answer this question?
Yeah, actually, I have to share my insight. The first problem is lack of communication with survivors and law enforcement bodies, and because survivors and victims who are detained in compound in Cambodia, they actually not trust the local authorities, because every single person who detained in scamming compound, they know the local authorities like police. They are very closer with compound manager or compound owners. So if they asking help from the law enforcement body, then they should be face some tough situation. Like I was asking help from police, and somehow police informed my company boss, and they are ready to beat up me. And I was lucky I not got beaten up, because my team leader, he protect me, and he said, oh, okay, so he not willing to work here, he asking help from police for rescuing from this compound, so it's better you sold him in another compound, then problem will be solved. So that is the situation. Like victims and survivors only can trust the civil society and organizations. Even sometimes they just asking help from embassies, and they not get good response. So it's Yeah.
Yeah. Valentina?
I was just going to say, as we've highlighted, that all the speakers I think highlighted this, there's just a lack of cooperation. So as Salam said, the survivors and the victims in the compounds, they trust the local NGOs, they trust the local actors that are operating to help combat this. But then, so the survivors and the local NGOs, they have a lot of knowledge about what is going on, but the authorities are looking in the wrong places for the evidence and for the key knowledge that will help combat this. And also, because there's a lack of cooperation between the law enforcement bodies, perhaps, for example, the cybercrime unit will be tasked with going in and stopping these scamming compounds, but then they won't have the knowledge on the human trafficking side. Whereas if there was cooperation between the different units, there would be a greater understanding of the crime as a whole, linked with the scamming and the compounds, the human trafficking that's happening in the compounds. Yeah.
Thank you both. Any other questions? Okay, I think if not, then thank you so much, everybody, for joining today's webinar. And hopefully there's something you can take away and, maybe share with your colleagues. And always feel free, very welcome to reach out to speak to any of us. And the goal of this webinar is really for information sharing and to really start a dialogue. And we can see the power of it. As we mentioned, that collaboration is important. And so we also kind of really wanted to highlight Richard's Road and the work in Taiwan, because we can see, even though of course it's way from perfect, there's still lots of things that the authorities, the police can do better. But then we do see a tremendous effort there, and it definitely, successfully arrest the criminals, and then also to as they mentioned, making the price of Taiwanese victim drop, because then it's not worthy to buy and sell Taiwanese. So we do want this model to be shared more to other countries that their citizens fall into victims to this crime. And so, yeah, we hope that conversation to continue, and that after the webinar, there will be a small feedback form, and it will just pop up on your screen. So please, fill that feedback form and let us know how you think, and please reach out, let us know. More collaborations are always welcome. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks to all the speakers for contributing to this enriching discussion today. And thank you to Ling for such a moving presentation and for helping us become more aware of the problems faced by victims. It looks like we have covered all the questions. And yes, we will be sharing the recording with everyone. It would be linked to you on email as well as on our website. We really appreciate all of you being here. And before we wrap up, I would just like to reiterate what Mina said, that please take out some time to fill out our end of webinar evaluation form. We will be sending that through via email right after this event. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you around the next time as well. Thank you.
Thank you.